our speaker for today, Mr. Piero Cossu. Mr. Cossu graduated from the University of Pisa in Linguistics with a thesis in Philology and Phonetics, wherein he analyzed meta-thesis in Sardinian with the government phonologic framework and CVVV model. And he has also won prestigious Franco Ferrero Award from the Italian Association of Voice Sciences, which is the most eminent institution working in the field of phonetics in Italy. And he won this award for his paper, which he presented in AISP conference in 2019. The title of his paper was The Meta-Thesis in the Dialect of Swahili, a descriptive analysis of rhotic consonant. Apart from that, the research focus of Mr. Cossu is on the Sardinian phonetics and especially phonology. In particular, on the meta-thesis, both diachronically and synchronically. His ongoing PhD thesis, which he expects to submit this year sometime very soon, is an investigation of phenomena of Sardinian Italian by applying models and theoretical frameworks which describe e-determine where interlinguistically orthography should find its own place as a level of analysis in linguistics. So I hope that this brief introduction would give an idea about the research interest and the work which Mr. Cossu is doing, and it's our immense pleasure to welcome him today. And I hand over the session now to Mr. Cossu for his presentation. You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I am honored to be a speaker at one of your webinars. So if you want, I can start. I share the screen, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, just give it the laptop one moment. Okay. Now you should be able to see my presentation slides.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. As has been introduced, I am working nowadays for my PhD project on the theme of the interface between orthography and phonology. I am trying to develop some hypotheses based on literature data and other hypotheses and trying to apply them to the production in L1 on the first language, since in literature, as soon as I found, I only seen that studies were concentrated on or metaphonological tasks or L2 production. So I tried to translate such hypothesis also to the L1 production. So my presentation today is structured as you can see. I will show some preliminary terminology about the writing systems typologies, but I'm sure you already know what I'm talking about. Then I will discuss briefly the depth orthographic hypothesis, that is the depth degrees of the alphabets. And then I will concentrate on the studies on the interface between orthography and phonology. Eventually, I'll try to show you very briefly, since due to privacy issue of my university, I'll show you some experimental data, but I'm not allowed to go in detail since it's a work still in progress. So as a final step, I will provide you with general analysis of the data I collected, and I will discuss it in the light of the functional phonology model by Boersma in 1998. And I don't know if you know such a model. Okay, and that's all. So I am basing my framework into the Faber definition of a writing system that is, as you can read, a set of markings in general that can be codified in an unambiguous way and serves a native speaker to produce in the written form infinite utterances in her L1 language. That's Faber 1987. And I think it's very useful to consider the terminology by Sampson, which distinguishes between logographies and phonographies, and among phonographies between syllabic and segmental writing systems. And I think it's very important in order to understand the process of reading to consider also the property of linearity that I will show you in the next slide. So very trivially, a logography is an orthography that codifies semantic units, of course, that are called logograms, whereas a phonography codifies phonological units that basically are called graphemes. So this is the first opposition, the very main and principal opposition. So for example, in Chinese, they use a logography. That is, they have what are commonly called ideograms, but actually it's more correct to call them logograms, or better, morphingrams, if this word exists, since they codify morphemes. From the other hand, Romance languages use letters in order to codify segments or phonemes, or sometimes, in the ancient times, syllables also. So the syllabaries codifying as the minimal linguistic unit or entity the syllable. A segmental writing system codifies a segment, of course, or a phoneme. We will see in the next slide, I am anticipating this issue, that syllabaries looks that are more natural than alphabets. We will see why I'm saying that. So there is another kind of, let's say, kind of writing system, for example, the hiragana and katakana, that it's in between a syllabic or a segmental. It is not an albugida. It can be called a Moraic writing system, since you surely know that in hiragana and katakana, they have graphemes that codify syllables, but also graphemes that codifies segments in codas, or, for example, branching nuclea, that is long vowels. They are separate graphemes in order to identify in the written form such sounds. So what actually they are codifying is the Moraic weight, since we know that consonants in onsets do not have a Moraic weight, but of course nucleus and codas, that is rhymes, do have a Moraic weight. It looks like that they pay attention to such a value. So I think it's the most appropriate terminology for hiragana and katakana. It's Moraic writing system. For what concerns the property of linearity, it can be defined as the equality of the representation of in the order of the written markings with the order of the sound produced in speech. This is in opposition with non-linear scripts, for example, the Hangul of Korean or the Egyptian hieroglyphs, where such a strict relationship is not very marked. It seems that the order of written markings, as far as I know, is organized more according to style or aesthetic, rather than to represent the orders of the units of the speech. From the other hand, of course, Spanish and Italian are almost perfectly linear. But I wanted to focus on English, since despite of using an alphabet, it is not so linear. Now I'm showing an example in the slide of sin and sign. In order to read sin, you may just read every letter, every grapheme, and convert it into a phoneme. You cannot do that in words such as sign, since in order to properly read the tonic, the only vowel of the word, the diphthong I, you have to pay attention also to the final vowel. So you have some kind of holistic reading. We will see that that is defined by the depth orthographic hypothesis. So English is not so linear. as an alphabet as compared to Spanish and Italian, where an alphabet, according to Faber 1992, is described as a phonography with a high degree of linearity and a concept I haven't introduced yet, which is the completeness. Completeness refers to the possibility to represent in the written form all of the units that are produced in speech. So, for example, the Old Hebrew writing system, since that it doesn't encode vowels, is only a consonant writing system, it cannot be called, according to Faber 1992, an alphabet, since it is incomplete. But still, according to such a definition, can English writing system can be called an alphabet? It uses the Latin alphabet, but since it has a very low degree of linearity, there is some controversy of what an alphabet really is. If an alphabet is just a set of markings, okay, we can say that the English alphabet, it is actually an alphabet. But if we put as an issue the reading process that is required, we have to think about of this issue about English writing system. Of course, Albanian, Russian, and Italian, Spanish are alphabets stricto sensu. So now I want to say something about alphabets and their consideration among the Western culture. They are always been thought as being the most accurate writing system, and the reason is that they encode phonemes as minimal units, as the minimal units. But many scholars point that this may be just a bias, since it implies that other writing systems are not so accurate. So basically, the people who claim that alphabets are the technical combination are those scholars who use alphabets. So nowadays there are more and more scholars that doubt such a claiming, because it was one of the main claims of the first structuralism era. For example, Bloomfield said that alphabets are a technical combination, but still alphabets do not deserve to be considered part of the linguistics, since they are just an external device in order to represent the speech in a written form, to record it. Saussure also say something about alphabets. He considered them as two separate systems, of course, but he claims that alphabets has the only purpose of that to represent language, which is the speech, which is the very nature of language. So still, he is kind of against the studies on the alphabet, but as we will see later, also Saussure noted something that he diminished it, but nowadays it's very interesting among scholars. I'll show you later. So, as I said, there are a lot of scholars that think of alphabets as the ultimate evolutionary stage of writing system. So they put them on the final step of the evolution of the technique of the writing systems, and put in the first step pictorial writing system or hieroglyphs. But again, as also Harris in his monograph points, this may be just a Western bias, since alphabets are used by those languages and those culture, we are considered in the Western world as the top of the, unfortunately, the top of the culture all around the world. So there is just this incorrect connection between alphabet and culture. Moreover, there is an important question that hides another important question. For example, alphabets are a discovery or an invention? It may sound trivial, but if alphabet were a discovery, it means that the phonemic awareness allowed the creation of alphabet. So phonemic awareness came first. But if it is an invention, the phonological awareness has been allowed by the creation of alphabets. That's what a series of scholars are claiming. For example, we have Studer Kennedy that claims that alphabets were discovered after people realized that language were made up of phonemes. So it implies the reality of the phoneme entity. But for example, here I'm citing Stetson that said that alphabets are not an invention in the sense of Studer Kennedy, but are just a reformulation of ancient syllabaries that were used to write different languages. So there is a re-handling of writing systems that, and such re-handling led to the creation of alphabets. In fact, Faber, 1992, claimed that it was just as Stetson claimed, because when Greeks adopted the Phoenician writing system, which were only consonant, used such consonant graphemes in order to represent vocalic grapheme. For example, the Alep grapheme, which in Phoenician referred to the glottal stop, which is a phoneme that is absent in the Greek language, they reinterpreted it as the low vowel A. So they are just borrowing such graphemes that were consonantal in origin in the Phoenician writing system in order to sign also the vocalic sounds into the writing form. So that's how the alphabet arose, but so it is not a realization, according to Faber, of the fact that languages are made up of phonemes. It's just something that came randomly, more or less. In Italian context, we have, for example, Albano Leoni, who recently wrote a very controversial in the Italian, among Italian scholars, a very controversial monograph, where he claims that the whole idea of phonemes is just a Western bias, that it was being proposed since the first stages of the linguistic studies, for example, by Saussure and so on. But he points that at the beginning, it was just a way in order to record the speech signal in order to study, because you know that at the time of Saussure, the recording devices weren't as good as are now. So they were so into trying to find an unambiguous way in order to represent the real sounds of languages. They realized that they cannot use common alphabets, since they were not properly adequate in order to represent speech signal. And this trying led to think that phonemes were real, but there were, according to Albano Leoni, no evidence of the reality of phonemes. That's what I have synthesized what Albano Leoni claims in his monograph. There is, for example, I don't know, it's very controversial, this position, but it seems to be maybe plausible, since, for example, the classical Chinese phonological theory never developed the concept of the segment or phoneme. They developed the concept of course of syllable, the concept of parts of syllable, which means onset and rhymes, but they never explicit the fact that onset and rhymes can be divided into single segments as the traditional phonological theory does. So you know that maybe what Albano Leoni claims may be a possibility. There are a series of studies, for example, that were investigating the phonological awareness and how it emerges in children acquiring a language. Of course, as Turner says, this can turn into an egg or chicken problem. That is, who came first, the phonological awareness or the alphabets? That is, the traditional, the most common conception of the, now we are talking about acquiring a reading and writing skill. The most common and well accepted conception is that you need first a phonological awareness in order to learn how to read and write. But as the seminal work from by Ferrero de Beroschi noticed, children in Argentina who were acquiring the writing skill in the first year of education in school began with a syllabic segmentation. And only then, only after that they were exposed to an alphabet, exposed to the process of conversion of alphabets to sounds, usually in school, they are taught, but also I was taught that this grapheme, this letter represent the first sound of this word. For example, the letter A represent the first sound of the word albero, which means tree. And so it seems that in their analysis, it seems that they are making a metaphonological process. They are learning also to segmentate speech into phonemes, but such phonemes were not present before being exposed to an alphabet. The same results has been replicated by Cosu et al. In 1989 in the Sardinian context. So with Sardinian children acquiring the Italian writing system, they were bilingual Italian and Sardinian. He noticed the same kind of development. That is, they were able to segment in syllables also before going into school, and they were unable to segment into phonemes. Only after being exposed to the alphabet in the first years of education, they get better and better in the segmentation task in phoneme. I think there is a very good paper by Davidson 2018, which claims that writing and the reading skill reprograms all, not only phonology, but all our metalinguistic competence. So in morphology, level of analysis, syntax, and also lexicon. Of course, I am interested only in phonology, since I don't know so much about syntax and so on. But I think I suggest you, if you don't know it, to read such a paper, because it gives a very lucid picture of the situation nowadays. So what about, again, the controversy on the phoneme? There are a series of studies that it seems that are in according to what Albano Leoni claimed in his monograph. For example, there are a series of studies on illiterate or writers of non-alphabetic writing system that cannot show, that are completely unable to segment in phonemes words of their L1 language. So this says something about our phonological awareness. Also, there are studies on the phoneme counting task with a literate speaker, and such studies show that people who are able to read in an alphabetic writing system, when asked to count sounds of their native language words, they count letters rather than actual sounds. So it seems that what they are thinking, what is present in their level of representation in their abstraction, in the phonological abstraction, is the orthographic structure rather than the phonological structure. Also, I think that are important the studies on the phonemic deletion tasks. They show that illiterates are very poor performers in doing such tasks, whereas literate people in alphabetic writing system can do such tasks very well. There is such a hypothesis by Katz and Frost that, that is called the orthographic depth hypothesis, where orthographic depth is defined by the rate of conversion between letters and phonemes, that is, between graphemes and speech sounds, where, of course, by definition, logographies are completely obscure, that have the maximum degree of depth, since they are not referring at all to phonology, even though Chinese writing system have some part in their logograms that refers to the pronunciation, but it's just more of a contour. It's just an help for the reader. Basically, they represent semantic units. But alphabets are not, they don't have all of them the same degree of depth. There is a variation. So for example, English and French are very deep orthographies in the sense of Frost and Katz, where Italian and Spanish are more shallow. No orthography is completely deep, of course, regarding alphabets, or completely shallow. Also Italian, for example, has some kind of depth, since we do not represent the lexical stress or the quality of mid-vowels. In Italian, we have a 7-vowel system where we have low vowels, mid-low vowels, mid-high vowels, and high vowels. Mid-low vowels and mid-high vowels are represented by the same graphemes, the graphemes E or E in English, and the grapheme O. So we have to know before what is the actual pronunciation of the grapheme, along with the lexical stress. So the hypothesis by Katz and Frost claims that during the reading process, shallow orthographies emphasize the recourse to the assembled phonology. On the other hand, deep orthographies make more recourse to the addressed phonology. Assembled phonology is defined by the process of convert letter by letter into a single phoneme. And addressed phonology, when we are talking about addressed phonology, instead we are making reference to the possibility to retrieve the phonological structure of a word by reading the word as a whole. So we are not converting grapheme by grapheme or letter by letter into one sound, so there's no one-to-one conversion rate. We are just reading the word holistically and then retrieving the sound structure from our memory. Also, it claims that the shallower an orthography, the greater is the recourse to phonology. Of course, this does not mean that English does not make recourse to phonology, given that it is a deep orthography, because it is just a tendency, of course. As I show you in the previous slide, also Italian require some degree of addressed phonology for what concerns the lexical stress of the quality of mid-vowels. That's the hypothesis about reading process that can be applicable to many studies that I have found in literature. For example, now I have chosen Taft 2006, that I think Gulab knows. In Taft 2006, there were a homophony detection test proposed to Australian English speakers. As you maybe know, Australian English is a non-rhotic variety. That means that they do not produce rhotic consonants in coda position, that is when preceding another consonant. So his task was like that. He showed in the written form non-words, such for example, con, and make listen to his participants a real word, which is supposed to be an homophone to the non-word that they were reading. So you can see in the slide, con as a non-word versus corn, which is a real word, which is pronounced in Australian English, con, just like as the non-word. So they are phonologically identical, they are homophone. But its results show that speakers have great difficulty in determining the homophony between such two words, couple of words, since he thinks that the underlying form of the real word corn is corn, of course, as you can read. That means it includes the rhotic consonant, and this is because of the imposition of the orthographic structure on the mental abstraction of speakers. He claims that because of course, if your environment of your L1 language never produced a rhotic consonant in coda position, how could you realize that such a rhotic consonant is present in the lexical form of words like corn? So he thinks that such a rhotic consonant in coda position surfaces after you are exposed to the alphabetic structure, to the orthography. It starts to be very important, so you abstracted it, and that's why you have difficulties in recognizing homophony between words of this kind. Similar results have been found, for example, in rhyme detection task by Stones et al., Ziegler, Ferrand, Ventura, and many, many more. For example, they found that literate speakers are slower in the reaction times in determining if two words are rhyming, if the orthography does not match. For example, caught and thought require longer reaction times than bought and thought. And the reason, according to such scholars, is that the orthography is not matching. When the orthography matches, they are way more rapid. So still there is the possibility for the orthographic structure to influence our phonological representation. So leading to the hypothesis of other scholars that I illustrate before. The same effect, then this is important and in line with such an analysis, is that of Ziegler and Munot, that claims that if people are illiterate, pre-literate, or literate in a non-alphabetic system, such effects of orthography influencing the reaction times in the determination of the rhyme was not found. That is that if you have not in mind the structure, the graphemic structure of words also of your L1 language, you are not influenced, so it does not interact with the sound representation. So it's still, that's another issue for what concerns the possibility that orthography is influencing our conception of language. So according also with Davidson 2019, who says that there is a reprogrammation of our metaphonological or meta-linguistic in general competence. Again, for example, now I will show you other studies. For example, Harriet Wills was one of the first who tried to investigate the possibility for literate speaker to in literate speaker to abstract not phonemes but graphemes in their phonological representation. For example, they noticed that they noticed that speakers of English count more sounds in pitch than in reach, even though they have the same amount of sounds and they also rhyme. And the analysis says that they think pitch has more sounds because it has more letters. There is pitch is spelled with a T, where reach is spelled without the grapheme T. So they think words like reach has less sounds as compared to pitch. The same result was found also by Pitlick, who noticed that also when learning a new language, even though the phonological structure of the L2 words is known, his study was concerning English native speakers learning Russian, and Pitlick noticed that English people tend to count letters rather than sounds, so applying constantly a 1-to-1 conversion rate rather than when required a 2-to-1 conversion rate. Russian as well as Italian may have digrams, that is 2 graphemes representing one only sounds. For example, in the example of pitch or reach, also CH represents only the affricate, the voiceless palatal affricate. But still, speakers tend to count the number of letters of graphemes rather than sounds. I have run a very informal experiment in Italian. I was asking Italian native speakers to count the sounds in the word aglio, that means garlic. Aglio has 3 sounds, a vowel, a palatal lateral, and another vowel. They count 4 sounds. They count 4 sounds since they claim that speakers I interviewed says that there is 1 vowel, as I said, there is 1 consonant that is represented by GL. I think they count the digram as 1 consonant since it is very systematic in the Italian orthography, but they count E as a sound. They think that E in the word aglio is present. They think they pronounce it, but they don't, of course. They say aglio, not aglio. So I think still is another evidence that there is a bias from the orthographic structure that makes you misperceive your pronunciation, your phonology. So it seems that the orthographic structure is very important. I think that this is due to the fact that orthography gives a visible input and not only acoustic. So you are, I think, more facilitated in store in the memory the structure of a word if you have to connect it to something that you can see rather than something that you can hear. So an hypothesis was proposed in literature by Per and Ziegler 2008, sorry. They claim that in perception or during metaphonological tasks, orthography and the phonological representation are co-activated online. They are both co-activated during the hearing of an acoustic signal. That may be true, but that do not says us much more about the production. So I have now, I wanted to show you such study since it is about production. Is a study from by Bassetti 2017. It was concerned on Italian native speakers that were learning English as an L2. The analysis in general is that Italian speakers, but the question, the issue may be widened to general, base their L2 phonology on their L1 orthography, where L1 orthography is thought to represent the L1 phonology, of course. So in Italian, we have geminate distinction. For example, fato, that means destiny, and fatto, that is the past tense of to make, to do, that is done or made. Whereas in English, there's no such an opposition for what concerns the consonantal length. So as I said, Italian orthography represent such geminates by the usage of two identical and adjacent graphemes, two consonants identical. So you can see fatto as opposed to fatto. From the other end, English orthography does have such a sequence of consonantal grapheme, but they do not correspond to a geminate. Rather, they might indicate the possibility for a vowel to be long or short. Long if there is only one consonantal grapheme, or short if there are two consonantal graphemes. So in the task of Bassetti was asking participants that were learners in the high school of English to read aloud words that can be differentiated according to the number of grapheme representing one consonant. For example, shopping, attitude, yellow, versus city, copy, and truly. And she noticed that there is a systematic categorization of gemination versus singleton consonants, and according to the distribution of the orthography. That is, every time that the English word is spelled with two identical consonants, they produce a geminate. And every time there is in the written form only one consonant, they produce a singleton. So the analysis of Bassetti is that they are not making any reference to the acoustic signal of the teacher of the English environment, but the orthographic structure is so strong that makes you misperceive the acoustic signal and makes you create a category that is absent in general in the L2 phonology, that is based, of course, on the orthographic structure. Talking back about Saussure wrote a very interesting chapter in his course of Linguistique Générale about alphabets and writing systems. For example, he noted that native speakers of French were more and more producing wrongly the word gagir, that means gamble, because according to him, they were interpreting the EU digram as a digram, of course, as a vocalic digram that in French represent in a great number of words the round front vowel E. So they were producing the word gagir as gagir, but etymologically the correct pronunciation should be gagir, since it is the derivation of gager, to bet, with the derivational morpheme ir. So in the reality, the digram is not EU or EU, but GE, that represents the voiced palatal fricative. Saussure was very critic in noticing such effects induced by the orthographic structure, but after 1 century, such phenomena are very studied. I am studying this kind of phenomena since points something that is very interesting. That is the fact that you may end with questions, for example, of what really is phonology? What are we really studying? If there are a series of studies that point that we are not making reference to the actual sounds of a word, but we need another point of anchorage in order to fix in our mind the structure of the lexemes, of the lexicon in general. So I think studies on the orthography phonology interface are very interesting also for this in the sense that is they point something that is been has been unstudied for decades. Also, for example, Skousen in English noticed that the reintroduction of the plosive alveolar t in words like often, which in fact are pronounced in the standard as often, he noticed that it's been in the process of our reintroduction. So they are producing the word as often because of the orthographic structure. Since the written form of languages is getting more and more common, people are making more and more reference to the orthographic structure. So they, in line also with the studies I showed you before about the phoneme counting task, they think that there is actually a t, so they pronounce it. So there is another hypothesis in literature by Munot and Ziegler 2008 that claims that the orthographic form is influencing the quality of our phonological representation. That is, once we learn an alphabetic writing system, and since alphabetic writing system require a 1-to-1 conversion rate in general, even though some orthographies are deeper than others, and so on, but still letters in isolation are always referring to a one only sound. So as a final mental process, there is the conversion grapheme by grapheme into phoneme. So they claim that the orthographic structure of a word may change, may modify the form of our phonological representation. In what measure, we do not know yet, but I think, according also to my experimental data, I think it is very strong, the influence of the orthography into the phonology. So we may ask also if, for example, the orthography, if influences the quality of phonology, it may also trigger phonological phenomena that otherwise would be unactivated, untriggered. So my hypothesis is that considering all of these studies, all of these hypotheses, we can expect that if there are orthographies that represent by graphemes, or better, that do not represent sounds in the grapheme structure, or there are graphemes that are not associated to phonemes, and such phonemes are triggers of a phonological phenomena, also these graphemes can trigger such phenomena. Please tell me if you are following in this picture, because maybe it's a little bit caustic and controversial. May I have a feedback?
Yeah, it's quite visible. Moreover, Mr. Kosu,
yeah, we are following this, but the only thing is that since your time running short, you will have to summarize in next 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I'll go very fast now. Yes, so I have put this hypothesis and I tested in Sardinian Italian and Standard Italian. So in metaphony and the nasal place assimilation. I was supposing that these processes can be triggered by also graphemes that were not associated to phonemes. And no, I can anticipate that results are positive. That means that whenever there is a grapheme that is not associated to a phoneme, in these cases where such phoneme is a trigger of the phonological phenomena, also the grapheme, where there is a 0-to-1 conversion rate between graphemes and phonemes, can trigger such phenomena. So it means that it means that at least in such cases, the phonological phenomena is not activated by the phonological structure, but is activated by another kind of structure that I think it is the orthographic structure, of course, since I do know, I cannot explain since otherwise where the trigger segment or the trigger unit come from. I wanted to show you, so I'm going fast, I wanted to show you some consideration from Chomsky-Hall, some patterns of English. There is a series of, as you know, a series of consideration about derivational rules and so on, abstract representations. And implicitly, basically implicitly, but sometimes a little bit more explicitly, they claim that the underlying representation from where the derivational rules come from in order to produce the correct phonetic form that English speakers realize, it's very similar, if not equal, to the orthographic form. So I don't know if Chomsky would agree with such a point of view, but he points that, for example, for what concerns the possibility of the lexical stress assignment, or the possibility of the voicing intervocalic sibilant, that orthographic may have an influence. He says that the intervocalic sibilant is not getting voiced if it is a geminate. We know the English has no geminate, but it is assuming a geminate sibilant in the phonological form, in the abstract form. And he says that the distribution of such geminates, well, it is not well discussed, but he says that it's mirrored in the orthographic form. Also for words as confetti, we have stress in fe, since it is a strong, an heavy syllable, because there is a geminate consonant. But such geminate consonant, in order to not be produced, needs to be explained by a postulated rule of simplification of the consonant. So there is, according to Chomsky-Hall, an abstract form that includes a geminate that implies a series of rules of stress assignment, of unvoicing in intervocalic position, and then as a final step, a rule that simplifies the geminate consonant into a singleton. I think it would be easier to claim that there is an orthographic structure on which speakers are basing their conception of language and their production, and that are influences also phonological processes in their native language. At page 131, Chomsky-Hall claims that in a note, so it's a little bit hidden, they claim that underlying representation, of course, are very similar to conventional orthography. They don't go very further, but I think the orthographic form should be taken more into account in order to understand, in my opinion, in order to understand how such phonological processes are distributed. So that's what I already said. There is a model of phonology, the functional phonology model by Boersma, which is, it looks very complicated, but actually it's very easy. It supposes a perceptual specification, that is the lexicon, that is represented in your articulated and acoustic output. And then there is a perception grammar that makes you discretize such output. And also, the listener did the same process, but in the opposite way. By an acoustic output, there is a perception grammar that converted it in discrete units. So there is a perceptual input that lead to the underlying form, that is the form of the lexicon. According to all what we said so far, we may hypothesize that such underlying form that is evidenced here may be the locus of the graphemic structure. That is, after we learn an alphabet, we may hypothesize that such structure posits itself in this position. So we are basing all of our production grammar, as you can see here, on such form. This form, which is by Boersma, the orthographic structure is never is never mentioned, but I'm saying that such model looks very appealing, looks going into the right direction. And for written languages in an alphabetic orthography, we may hypothesize that when we learn an alphabet, something changes, as we've seen, and what is changing is this one, is the underlying form. I think we need further investigation, trying to find more evidence of this fact, because I find it very, very appealing as a proposal. So thank you. I finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kosu. Thanks a lot. Now I would request Professor Yuan Singh sir to give the closing remarks, valedictory address, as well as enlighten us with his summary of the webinar today.
Yeah, thank you, Aniket. I think everything perhaps might not have been very easily followed by everybody, but a lot of important points were covered by Pierre Kosu. And I think one of the most important take from his lecture, from his webinar, is the fact that how orthography interferes in learning phonology of the other language, of the L2. Even if you share the orthography, that is, even in case of Italian and English sharing the alphabetic system, how it is really interfering, how much it is interfering in learning the correct pronunciation and management of the phonological representation of English. Now, the issue vis-a-vis Indian context is that although he's discussed various kinds of orthographies, the Indian orthography was missing in his discussion. But the interesting thing about the Indian orthography is that you have the syllabic system and you have the vowel which is going with every consonant. So the vowel forms have two different forms, two different shapes. One that comes with the consonant, one that comes when it stands alone. And if you remember, Aniket and Pierre, you know, when we teach the children in schools, one of the first things we teach while teaching orthography, that we teach them, like, suppose the consonant is ka. The first consonant in our orthography is ka, which is the velar consonant, unvoiced, unaspirated velar consonant. Okay. Now, for that, when we teach them, we have a rhyming pattern for teaching them, because we join the vowels with that. We say kaka, ki, kuku, badam, ke, kau, kanka, ram. Then we just tell the children that, you know, it's the same consonant ka, which can actually undergo so many variations as you join with the vowels. So orthography and phonology interface is built into our teaching system for children, you know, in the Indian context. Whereas in case of the European context in particular, the situation becomes complicated because you're sharing the same script among so many people, and the script, that is orthography and phonology interface, the rules of exchange are so very different in each language. So that really is a big challenge for a Swedish person to learn English or an Italian person to learn English to be able to speak that.
Yeah.
So do you agree that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. For what concerns the Indian context, I think that if you have a syllabic writing system for children, it seems to be way easier to get the reading writing skill, and moreover, yeah, there's going to be maybe I don't know, less influences from the orthography into the Indian phonology, since it seems that children, or as I said, people who are literate in non-alphabetic scripts do not have the conception of the phoneme, they have the conception of the syllable. So I think it's the syllabaries are, in my opinion, are the most natural writing systems, since they encode the most natural unit, minimal unit of that we can conceive without any learning. So yeah, the question was actually,
yeah, actually the point that I was trying to make is that for the Indian learners of English,
okay.
When they go from a syllabic orthography background into a different kind of orthography background,
Okay.
challenge is very different.
Yeah, it's way different, and of course they are as an adult they are making they are learning a process that alphabetic readers and writers learns when they were children. So I think it's difficult and different if you have to learn an alphabet, and but is not so.
There is a question. There is a question on the chat box. Dr. Shubro Paroi from our Chinese faculty member is asking this question. Could you please tell me about the way to access the Chinese mental lexicon? How do they really think about the mental lexicon?
Okay. There is a paper from Bassetti again, but in 2005, if I'm not wrong, she investigated the possibility of the differences on the conception of the lexicon between English speakers and Chinese speakers. Is very interesting because it seems that also the concept of word that it seems so natural may be different according to the language or according to the orthographic system. So where for English speakers you access to the lexicon, we don't know actually how you access the lexicon by English speakers that are illiterate, but when you are literate in English, you think of your lexicon as being made up of words, and words have the orthographic structure, that is, they are strings of graphemes that are separated by spaces. For Chinese speakers, to recognize a word, it's way more difficult. And in the investigation of Bassetti, it has been shown that they go more or less randomly. A series of strategies have been were emerging when when native speakers of Chinese were asked to determine how many words there are in the sentence in Chinese that was that was written in logograms.
Over to you, Aniket. I think you have to sum up because the time is running out. Yeah, Aniket, you have to come in and find out any other question.
I can hear.
Aniket sir, please unmute.
Yeah, to sum it up, it was a very nice and enlightening session, and I particularly do not have any question, but definitely your session today has given us enough impetus to carry further research in Indian context, particularly pertaining to the interface between orthography and phonology. And as sir has mentioned it, yes, our way of training since childhood has been very different, where we hardly come to distinguish between the interface as you have discussed. So you have given us a new light to look into this phonology and orthography interface. We thank you a lot for your time and presence, and wish you a pleasant day.
Thank you to you.
Yeah, thank you.